In my time of reading books, I've read a lot of books with very unlikable characters that you just want to punch really bad. So I thought we might as well talk about them. Welcome back to BG's Books. I'm Mr. BG, and today I will be ranking some characters that I don't find very likable, and I would rather say punchable in books. So I've been kind of thinking about this idea for a couple days now, and I think that it would be just a really interesting idea to kind of talk about. I could title this unlikable characters. I could title this villains, but not all these characters are necessarily villains per se. A lot of these characters are just kind of characters who are just like either really annoying and you just want to keep quiet, or like they have a fatal flaw that leads to their downfall or something like that. So these aren't necessarily villains, they're just people that I don't find very likable in books. And so I have five for you today instead of the usual 10 because I was thinking of 10 and I realized that it was actually quite hard thinking of just five. So I don't know, I can make a video in the future with five more or whatever. But yeah, I'm just making this video as like really quick to just say what characters I think are super unlikable in books and why I think they are punchable per se. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into this list. So the first character I have today is Captain Ahab from Moby Dick. So of course, Captain Ahab is one of the main characters of Moby Dick. He is the captain of the ship the crew is on. I think it's called the Pequod. Anyway, so Captain Ahab is a very interesting character because back in the day, the white whale, Moby Dick, the whale he's looking for, took his leg, and so ever since then he's kind of been on a revenge vendetta against this whale for taking his leg. And so that's actually super relatable. I wouldn't say he's a full-on villain. I'd say he's very much a complicated character. But the reason why he's punchable for me is because some of the stuff he does in the book, it's like, of course, this whole thing is to get revenge on the whale for taking his leg. And then while searching for the whale, this other ship comes up to the Pequod and asks Captain Ahab to help them find someone who they've lost. And then he just completely disregards anything that they say because he's just focused on getting this whale. And like at the end of the book, he's so intent on getting this whale that he basically gets everyone on the crew except for Ishmael killed. So Captain Ahab is not necessarily a villain, but he's just rather punchable to me because he's just like so spiteful of this whale for taking one thing from him that he doesn't like have a life outside of killing this whale. His actions lead to either being disrespectful to other ships or just outright getting his entire crew, including himself, killed. So yeah, not really a villain, but certainly very unlikable and certainly very punchable, I guess you could say. The next character I have is Holden Caulfield from The Catcher in the Rye. So Holden Caulfield is the main character of The Catcher in the Rye, and why I think he's punchable is, like Captain Ahab, he's not necessarily a bad person or a villain. It's just that throughout the entire book, he's got a bit of an authority problem. He doesn't really trust any adults. And it's like, sometimes he's proven right because some adults are out to get him. But there's a lot of adults or even just other people in general that do want him to just have the best life he can and just wants him to do something with his life. But Holden Caulfield is like, you're a bad person. I hate you so much. Don't tell me what to do with my life or whatever. It's like he's very cynical. He's very anti-authority, I guess you could say. And anytime someone actually does want the best for him, he just always thinks there's someone out to get him. And while sometimes that's true, other times it is not true. So even though Holden Caulfield is not a villain. He is just a very irritating character. I would even say he's very unlikable, so that makes you kind of want to, punch him occasionally. Not all the time. Sometimes he's cool, but most times he's just very irritating and cynical, and you're just kind of tired of his yapping and his rebelliousness after like halfway through the book. So, yeah, Holden Caulfield is number 4. Coming in at number 3 is a real terrible character, and it is Percy Wetmore from The Green Mile. So Percy Wetmore is one of the death row guards at the prison that Paul Edgecombe works at in The Green Mile. Paul Edgecombe is, of course, the main character. And Percy Wetmore is an execution guard, just like him on death row. And basically what makes Percy so bad is that he's just kind of the worst of the worst. I mean, The Green Mile is a Stephen King book, so having a Stephen King character on this list should be no surprise. His like villain characters or his bully characters are just the worst ever. But so Percy Wetmore is actually despised by guards and inmates alike. Keep in mind, the inmates on this death row area, they're in here for like murder or even like more serious crimes. So yeah, even these terrible people hate Percy Wetmore just because of how terrible he is. Like, just as an example, one of the prisoners in The Green Mile, Richard Delacroix, he becomes very infatuated with this mouse who he names Mr. Jingles. And so Mr. Jingles is like his best friend and his pet. And so what Percy does is that as Mr. Jingles is running across the cells, I guess you could say, Percy Wetmore is just like, yeah, just steps on him right about that and just like crushes the poor mouse. The mouse ends up being fine, by the way, but like this is just how depraved Percy is, and like Delacroix was watching it all and all that, and it like made him really sad. So yeah, Percy Wetmore is also very depraved. And then later, also involving Delacroix, it is finally Delacroix's turn to be executed. And so basically the rule is that you're supposed to wet a sponge and then put it on top of their head so that the electricity doesn't like go all the way out or anything. But Percy, being the jerk that he is, he just doesn't wet the sponge and just puts a dry sponge on it, sabotaging the execution and making the body smell really bad. So those are just 2 things that I specifically remember about Percy Wetmore. I know he's done so much more stuff that's probably even worse than those, but I haven't read The Green Mile in a while, so I can't tell you what they are off the top of my head. But yeah, from what I remember about Percy Wetmore, he is certainly a very, very mean individual, and he is very much unlikable and very much punchable. So yeah, Percy Wetmore is at number 3. So my choice for the number 2 pick is a choice that I don't think will surprise literally anyone who knows what books I read. But number 2 is, of course, Humbert Humbert from Lolita. And Humbert Humbert is the main character of Lolita. He is about a 30 or 40-year-old man who is a pedophile because he loves these girls called nymphets. And nymphets are girls between the ages of 9 and 14. And so obviously that already kind of shows that Humbert Humbert is a very bad person. He's a pedophile, which is not good. But it gets even worse. So Humbert Humbert, his tragic backstory goes that when he was a child, he had a really good female friend that he was probably going to like date and marry when they grew up. But unfortunately, disease took her very early, so she never got to become an adult. And so that kind of stuck with Humbert Humbert his entire life. And so all he wants to do is just recapture that romance with a young girl like he did back when he was a child. So after he moves to the US and stuff, he finds that his original house has burned down in a fire. And so he gets a room in a house by this girl named Dolores Hayes' mother. And so that's when, of course, he meets Dolores Hayes, who is 12 years old, who he starts calling Lolita. So there you go. And then over the course of the story, Humbert Humbert decides to date and even marry Dolores Hayes' mother so that when her back is turned or whatever, he can run away with little Dolores and be with Dolores. because he doesn't want to be with Dolores' mother. He wants to be with little Lolita, who is, of course, Dolores. So, that's very creepy. And then on top of just being a pedophile and a bad person, Humbert Humbert also has a lot of other like immoral acts that he does. First of all, he's just like a pathological liar. He contradicts himself quite a few times in the book, actually. And then at the end, he murders a guy who kidnaps Lolita, and that's actually the only reason he goes to jail. He never goes to jail for his exploitation of a young child. He just goes to jail for the murder of someone, which, I mean, that's a start, but that's not everything that he's done. But basically, so Humbert Humbert is a terrible person who is willing to lie and murder and even just exploit children just because he lost the love of his life when she was a child. And so that is his entire reason, and I think that makes him very unlikable and very punchable. So yes, Humbert Humbert is in the number 2 spot. So of course, with the number 2 being the character that it was, it leaves you probably wondering what character is worse than an actual pedophile at the number 1 spot. And the character in the number 1 spot is Charlie Decker from Rage. So of course I do not have a solo edition of Rage, so this is the 4 earliest Bachman books by Stephen King, and Charlie Decker is in Rage, the first book in this omnibus. And the reason why I think Charlie Decker is the most unlikable and most punchable character of all the characters I've talked about in this video is because he's something that I definitely do have a vendetta against, as if pedophilia isn't one of them. It is, I promise. But Charlie Decker is a school shooter. Now, I don't like school shooters, and I'm willing to bet that you don't, because if you do, you're probably a little psycho. But I do not like school shooters, and Charlie Decker uses his tragic backstory, which basically goes down to his father was quite abusive in his childhood, and his mother was overprotective in his childhood. So, similar to Holden Caulfield from Catcher in the Rye, he's got a bit of an authority problem, and so he decides to take care of that by physically ending lives, which I do not like in the slightest. Charlie Decker is like such an incredible Stephen King villain too. It's like, don't get me twisted. Rage is a fantastic book, and I think Charlie Decker is a fantastic villain, but he is a terrible person. So like, he kills 2 people. He basically toys with every authority figure throughout the book. He threatens people. He like takes the entire class hostage and forces them to confess like stuff about themselves that they never wanted to admit to anyone ever in the world. So that's also pretty messed up. And then the one character in Rage who seems like good, who wants to escape the trap that they're in and convict Charlie of his crimes, he's seen as the villain and therefore gets like treated as the villain for it. But I think Charlie's is the true villain. He is a evil sociopath. He clearly does not care about murdering. He doesn't care about lying. Although he is very honest at other times, which is also very weird. But anyway, Charlie Decker is just a very manipulative and psychopathic sociopath who just does not have a lot of empathy for authority figures and just wishes that he could be Holden Caulfield and rebel against authority, but he goes about it in a more violent way than Holden Caulfield ever could. So I know that this might be a shock that Charlie Decker is my number 1 pick, but I think that Charlie Decker deserves it. I mean, he shoots up a school, he willingly kills 2 people, ruins the lives of someone else, or I guess ruins someone else's life by making them literally a vegetable, you could say, in medical terms. And yeah, he's just a very bad person who just toys with authority figures, not political figures, and just kind of doesn't just care about what anyone thinks about him unless he wants to make a message. So yeah, I know it's a little controversial, but for all those reasons, Charlie Decker is my number 1 pick for most punchable characters on this list. So yeah, Charlie Decker is the worst of the worst. But yeah, guys, that is the end of the list, and it is also the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I've been thinking about making a video like this for a little bit now, but I finally got it under control and I got all my 5 characters that I wanted to talk about. Now, it was quite hard for me to like get 10, so I just settled for 5 because it was actually really hard to get 5 as it is. But now that I'm thinking about it, there are even more characters that I could talk about, not only from just Stephen King alone, so I could just make that its own video itself, just unlikable Stephen King characters, but also like books from here. It's like Lord of the Flies, I could mention that. To Kill a Mockingbird, I could mention that. And like even Animal Farm by George Orwell. So like I definitely want to make a part 2 in the future to kind of have like 5 more characters that are very punchable in books. But I will leave it off here for now. Anyway, in the meantime, I would love to hear your picks for the top 5 most punchable characters in books you have read. Your list will probably look very different to mine, but hey, that's what conversation is all about. I would love to read your picks. And yeah, also leave any suggestions for any more video ideas, or just let me know if there's any more characters that you think I should have mentioned in this video, and maybe I'll mention them in the next video. But anyway, yeah, of course, that is the end of the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. I've been Mr. BG, and this has been BG's Books, and I will see you guys in the next video.